Alright everyone, welcome back to another video. Last time we left off with New England and the Puritans, talking about the colonies that would make up New England and the states that would make up New England today, and the Puritans who very much influence that area of the country. We're now on to the Middle Colonies. Between New England and the South lie the Empire State of New York and the Keystone State of Pennsylvania, as well as the smaller states of New Jersey and Delaware. They had certain important advantages over the other colonies. New England had little mineral wealth, no great rivers, and a cold climate. As John Greenleaf Whiter said, her yellow sands are sands alone. Her only mines are ice and stone. The South had a warm climate and great rivers, but it lay further away from England. Pennsylvania had hidden treasures of oil and coal. New York had the only easy passage from the Atlantic coast to the Great Lakes by way of the Hudson and Mohawk rivers, and in later times, the Erie Canal. The Hudson was not as much of a river as a drowned valley, vast in extent and opening on one of the best harbors in the world. The climate of these middle colonies was midway between the sternness of New England and the relaxing heat of the South. Another characteristic of the middle colonies was the cosmopolitan character of its population. New York was Dutch before it became English. Delaware was originally a Swedish settlement. Pennsylvania, because of its religious tolerance, attracted many dissidents from Germany, and some of those Mennonites cling to this day to their German speech and Old World customs. In more recent years, immigrants have poured into the mines and factories of Pennsylvania, and today New York has more Jews than Jerusalem, more Irish than Dublin, and more blacks than any African city. It also has large contingents of a dozen other peoples. The Dutch West Indies Company established the first settlement on Manhattan Island, purchased from the Indians in 1626, and the colony remained Dutch until 1664. It extended north to Albany, incorporated much of New Jersey, and took over a small Swedish settlement in Delaware. Many old American families trace their family trees back to these Knickerbocker Dutch. I gotta make sure I say that like that. Alright, it's what it is. Hopefully YouTube doesn't pick up on that. Origins. After a war between Britain and the Netherlands, New Netherland became New York, and New Amsterdam, New York City, both named for the Duke of York. The Dutch element in the present American population is not very large, but it contains some famous names, such as the two President Roosevelts and several wealthy landlords and financiers. In colonial times, New York lagged behind Virginia, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania in population, but under the Republic, it grew rapidly. New York City is still the most populous city, and New York State is second in population only to California. King Charles II owed a debt to Admiral Sir William Penn. It was not convenient for him to pay it in cash, but it could be paid in land. Penn's son, William Penn, was a friend, or Quaker, who wanted a home for his persecuted fellow believers. He suggested the appropriate name Sylvania, the land of woods, for the colony. Charles clapped Penn onto this, and it became Pennsylvania. Penn then bought the land from the Indians, a transaction of which Voltaire later said, with a slight exaggeration, it was the only treaty not confirmed by oaths, and the only one not broken by either side. Pennsylvania prospered greatly, although there was some friction between the proprietors and the descendants of Penn and the settlers. The chief city was Philadelphia, or the city of brotherly love, which became for a time the chief city in the colonies. The most important Pennsylvania, very probably the most important America in the whole colonial period, was Benjamin Franklin. He was born in Boston, as New Englanders love to point out, but his entire career was wrapped up in Pennsylvania. He has been called the most typical American and the only man who never bored anyone. Certainly, few, if any, men have been more versatile. He was printer, publisher, author, postmaster, diplomat, statesman, and natural scientist. In this last capacity, he was the most widely known for experiments proving that lightning was a form of electricity. He also took the temperature of ocean currents. In interested himself in agriculture, medicine, and geology, and invented the Franklin stone. He suggested, although he was unable to realize, a federation of 13 colonies. As ambassador to France, he helped bring about the alliance with the rebel colonies, which determined the result of the revolution. He gave his approval to the new constitution. The French thought of him as Jean-Jacques Rousseau, natural man, unspoiled by civilization. As a matter of fact, he was as much at home in Paris as in Philadelphia. Yet there remained in him some trace of the original canny Poor Richard, who gave a library to a town that had asked for a bell. Sense being preferable to sound, and it suggested the turkey as a better American emblem than the eagle, since it was native to America and a more useful bird. Now, people don't necessarily think about that, but the eagle not necessarily having the best reputation, you could say. We're not gonna go to the next page. I don't think we're gonna actually be able to have time for that, but I can talk about some of this. It's nice to see a lot of the bringing up of these middle colonies. You know, they kind of get lost today a lot of times in talking about the South and New England. And New York, it's not, New York State is not the second most populous anymore, I don't believe. I think it's the third at this point, um, lagging behind Texas. But it was, for a long time, a very dominant state. It was the most populous state for quite a while. Um, you really can't underestimate New York. And New York City, I believe, is still the most populous city in the United States. I don't think that's ever changed, but um, yeah, it's very interesting. And it's very interesting. They talk about Benjamin Franklin. He definitely an interesting character. Uh, really one of those people that just kind of did everything, and he was just kind of could get along with everybody. Everyone knew him. Everyone liked him, and really helped shape a lot of what America would be in many ways. And heck, even by the American Revolution, he was an old guy. Like, we think of a lot of the founding fathers as older men because they had powdered wigs. And so a lot of the pictures you see is them with powdered wigs, but they really weren't that old. 30s, 40s. I think the youngest was in his 20s, Alexander Hamilton. But they really weren't that old. But Benjamin Franklin, by this point, is like in his 60s or 70s. He's kind of an older guy. And so it's really interesting to see him just, yeah, he's still doing whatever, and you would never really gather. You'd think he's just on the same pace as a lot of these guys, and he was just that guy. He could really do quite a bit. So it's good that they talk about him quite a bit. But now we're going to talk about some of these pictures. So at this picture up here, in 1661, William Penn signed a treaty with the Indians and founded the province of Pennsylvania. The illustration of the signing is by Currier and Ives. You can see right there. And obviously, Penn, Pennsylvania. Penn's land of the woods, you could say. It's just very, very interesting. I do have to say so myself. And then right here is the Dutch settlers in the middle colonies did a great deal of trading with the local Indians. Yeah, the Dutch, they like to trade. That's just more like what they more that's more what they liked. Not to say they were always the nicest to the Native Americans, of course, but trading was much more in their blood than anything else. On the top left here is one of the most distinguished of all Americans was the Renaissance man from Pennsylvania, although he was born in Massachusetts, Benjamin Franklin. So that's the old Benjamin Franklin there. Nope, if it wants to focus on him. As you can see, sometimes the light makes the focus kind of all messed up, but an interesting individual, you could say. On the top right, so right here, an engraving of the Philadelphia State House by William Birch and Son shows what the structure looked like in 1798, and 10 years after the United States Constitution was ratified. Above is Benjamin Franklin and his kite experiment. Although scientists say that Franklin was lucky in not being electrocuted, he did prove that lightning was a form of electricity, a fact that had been unknown before he began his scientific research. Yeah, a lot of people think he discovered electricity. He did not discover electricity. It was more stuff to do with lightning specifically, and things like that. It's just, but it was a common belief for a long time that he discovered electricity. Now, people knew about it, they just didn't know certain things about lightning and electricity in the air kind of thing. But that's going to do it for this video. If you guys liked the video, leave a like. If you have any ways you can improve these videos, leave a comment down below. I always appreciate your feedback. And as always, subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Thank you.